guys, hi there. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Julia and I like to make videos on motherhood and lifestyle. If you can't tell by today's video, we are going to be talking about my daughter's birth story. I loved it. I thought it was everything that I have ever wanted out of a birth. It was beautiful. It was a little chaotic towards the end, but I'll tell you why. So I had Eleanor November 8th at it's like 10:32 or something like that in the morning. And my labor was about 10 hours long. So she was my first. It was only 10 hours. Everything, it may seem like it was a long time to be in labor, but in the moment, it went by so quickly. So quickly. So let's back up. So a few days before I had her, I noticed that my body is like, it's getting ready for labor and delivery. I had lost my mucus plug probably at like 37-ish weeks. And I knew that that doesn't really mean anything because your mucus plug can grow back if you didn't know. So I was like, all right, I lost it. I don't know if I lost part of it or if I lost all of it because I don't know how much mucus is supposed to be there, like the average amount. So I was like, all right, well, that's either partially gone or all the way gone, but I'm not gonna like count my chickens before they hatch because that doesn't mean anything. And then I noticed that my belly dropped some. I was finally able to breathe because I was carrying her so high. And then a few days later, after I noticed that my mucus plug was gone, I started, okay, let me preface this entire video with, it's a lot of TMI. So if you don't want to hear about labor and delivery, just click on out because this is natural. This is what a mom's body is about to do. A few days after losing my mucus plug, I was starting to get the runs. I had diarrhea like on and off for a few days. And I had read, and I think it was in one of my apps, it might have been, it gave me the little notice that these are the signs that you may be experiencing because labor is near. And one of those was your body is just getting rid of stuff. So you would either be like throwing up or you're going to have diarrhea or you're going to have both. Thankfully, I wasn't nauseous. I just had diarrhea. And it wasn't constant. It would just be a few times throughout the day. And at first I thought, man, did I eat something bad? Because I have a very sensitive stomach. But when I was pregnant with Eleanor, like I could eat the normal foods that would really hurt my stomach and it was fine. So I was like, man, this is kind of weird. Like, what's going on? And then sure enough, I looked at my app and it gave me that little notice that, hey, you know, labor may be near. Your body's preparing for labor. And sure enough, it was preparing myself for labor. And then I was going to go to my 38-week appointment and I had called the office prior because I had heard or read somewhere that you can get your membrane stripped like around this time. And for a lot of women, it like kicks up labor. And then for other women, they have to get it stripped a few times. So I called the office. I was like, hey, you know, like, do you think my midwife could strip my membrane while I'm there if I am a good candidate? She's like, well, she normally doesn't do it this early, but I'll put it out in your chart. And if she thinks that you're a good candidate, then she'll strip it. So by that point, I was getting checked at every appointment. Some women don't like to get checked at every appointment starting at 36 weeks. I personally do because I like to know how far along I am. And when she started checking me, I had already been dilated to, I think it was either 1 or 2. And when I went into my 38-week appointment, I was at a 3 and I think I was at like 50 or 75% effaced. I think it might have been 75% effaced. So my body was like really getting into labor mode. And I think a reason for how quickly things had progressed was because I was having Braxton Hicks contractions starting at 14 weeks. So my uterus was already contracting. It was already preparing itself. It like knew what to do basically. And then went to the appointment. She checked me, told me how far along I am. She's like, I can strip your membranes if you want to. And I said, yes, please strip my membranes. I am so uncomfortable. I was so swollen, and I was just done being pregnant by that point. She's like, all right, it's going to be really uncomfortable, but nothing like you're going to experience when you go into active labor. So I was like, all right, sweet. So she told me like to get into a certain position, and when you get your membrane stripped, you have to, obviously you're laying on your back, but you have to make a fist, and you kind of sit on that so your pelvis is elevated. So that's what I did, and it was really uncomfortable, not gonna lie. It kind of hurt, but I kept telling myself, like, this is nothing like labor and delivery. You just need to basically suck it up and deal with it. So she quickly stretched my membrane, and she's like, all right, well, you're either going to go into labor tonight or it's going to be a few days. And she had been telling me this from like 37 weeks. She's like, you're really low. You're pretty progressed. I wouldn't think you're going to go either to your due date or past your due date. I think you're going to go a little bit before. But she would warn me. She's like, I could be totally wrong though, so just don't get your hopes up. But after she stripped my membrane, she basically told me, you're either going to go into labor tonight or in the next few days. If you go tonight, I'm on call so I can take you in. And I was like, okay, please, I need to go into labor tonight. Like, please, Lord, let me go into labor. So we left the appointment, and before we left, she said, if you want, you can take some evening primrose oil. Some women just like take it orally. Some women poke a little hole in it and then just like shove it up your hoo-ha. I don't know if YouTube will let me say the actual word. Like, shove it up there and just let it dissolve. I didn't do that. I just took it orally because I thought, I'm already this far ahead. Like, it doesn't really matter. So I went to the store, and I was cramping the entire time after I left the appointment. Josh and I took separate cars because we were coming from work. So he went home, started doing his own thing. I told him, like, hey, like, let's just be prepared in case it does happen tonight. So he went home. He started finishing a project. I think we were still renovating. We definitely were renovating the house. I think we were painting that night, though. So he started painting. I went to the store. I got a few last-minute things for, like, the pantry, and then I got the evening primrose oil. And this entire time I was cramping, and it did feel like period cramps. It was really, really uncomfortable, and I had to like lean on the cart a little bit because it was just that uncomfortable. So I was like, okay, I'm like really hoping I go into labor tonight, but I'm not going to get my hopes up. So I got home, took the pill, we had dinner, and we finished painting, and then we just relaxed until we went to bed. I think I went to bed at like 10-ish. Yeah, I went to bed at 10. Josh was still up doing his own thing. I think he might have been playing video games. And I kid you not, I got my very first contraction at midnight. So on November 8th, I got my very first contraction, and it woke me up. Like, from a dead sleep, I woke up. I was like, oh no. I looked at my phone, saw that it was midnight, went to the bathroom because constantly having to pee at this point. And I told Josh, I'm like, I just had my very first contraction. If I were you, I'd go to bed right now because I don't know how fast this is going to happen, and I don't know how much rest we're going to get. So I've never seen him get off of the couch and like get the living room squared away for night before getting into bed. Like, he moved quick. So he came to bed, and by this point, my contractions were really picking up. So I laid in bed for like an hour and a half. I wasn't able to go back to sleep because I wanted to do my best to time the contractions. They were just like really uncomfortable. They weren't unbearable by any means. They were just uncomfortable, and I couldn't sleep through them. Excuse me. So I left the bedroom, and I went to the living room, and I started bouncing on my ball, and I had friends on. And at this point, it was like 2 o'clock, and they were every like 7 to 10 minutes apart, but they weren't super strong. They were just still really uncomfortable. I was able to talk through them. Some of them I had to like kind of focus a little bit more on them, but for the most part, I was able to talk through them if I needed to. No one was awake though, but if I needed to talk through them, I could. And at this point is when I called my midwife, because I noticed that they were starting to get a little closer together. And just like something in my head said, you need to call your midwife because, you know, things are going to pick up very quickly. It's not going to be a very long labor for you. And I'm glad I listened to my body. So I called my midwife. I explained everything to her. And thankfully, she was on call. So it was the midwife I'd been seeing throughout the entire pregnancy. And I said, I don't exactly know when to come in because we are about 35, 40 minutes away from the hospital. She said, it's completely up to you. The worst that can happen is they send you back home. I thought, okay, well, shoot, that's what they all say. And I didn't want to be the person to go to the hospital and get sent home. And granted, my water hadn't broken yet. I was just having contractions. So I waited a little bit longer, and it was like 2:30. Might have been 3 o'clock at this point. I woke Josh up and I said, hey, I really think that we need to like get the last minute stuff in our bags and head to the hospital. If you want to shower, go ahead. I'm going to start getting ready myself. So that's what we did. He only got a few hours of sleep. I only got like 2 hours of sleep. And we just got everything ready, put the last minute stuff in our bags, and we headed out the door. And by this point, it might have been 4, maybe 4:30. And got to the hospital. And at this point, my contractions were really painful. I had to focus on breathing through them. There were a few here and there when it was just like a really dull pain and I was able to talk through them, but for the most part, it was like really uncomfortable. And my app, when I was tracking it, it kept telling me this is the time you need to go to the hospital, and I kept ignoring it because I was like, no, they're only like 7 minutes apart and I need them to be 5 minutes apart. When we got to the hospital, the main entrance was still closed because it was before visiting hours, which I think it opened up at like, it was either 6 or 7. So the main entrance was closed, and the women's health, labor and delivery area was still closed. So we had to go in through the ER, had to tell security, like, this is why we're here. We need you to take us through the back way to labor and delivery. And I know that it wasn't the guy's fault, but he was an older gentleman and he was moving pretty slow, like taking his time. And that pissed me off. And then what pissed me off even more was I was having contractions, so I would have to stop and wait and then move. But I wanted to like book it in between the contractions, but he was taking his sweet time. So we finally get to labor and delivery, and they bring us into triage to actually make sure that you are in fact in labor, and just to monitor the baby and everything. So they put me in there, they get me all hooked up to whatever it is, they check my blood pressure and all of that stuff. And my midwife came in there and she checked me. She's like, you know, you're only at a 3, almost at a 4, but we need you to be at a solid 4 before we can admit you. So go ahead, try to walk around a little bit for the next hour. We're going to get you a peanut ball, and we're just going to monitor you for the next hour to see if you can get to a 4. If you can't get to a 4, then you're probably going to have to go back home and just wait. So I was like, oh, shoot. I knew this was going to happen. So Josh and I walked around the maternity ward because I don't think we were able to leave at that point. Or we didn't want to. So we're walking around the maternity ward. It's very small, you know. You see the same faces again and again and again at the nurse's station. And I go back into the room because I just couldn't walk anymore. I was having really bad contractions. And I had asked for the peanut ball. So the contractions were so bad. I was like squeezing Josh's hand. I was having them. And this is like when we got to the hospital, into the triage room. I was squeezing Josh's hand because the contractions were so painful and I couldn't talk through them anymore. Like there weren't a few that I was able to kind of talk through them. No, I couldn't talk through any of them. I'm squeezing his hand. He's telling me, you need to breathe through these contractions because it's only going to get worse. You need to practice your breathing. Take a walk through the maternity ward. I asked for the peanut ball to put in between my legs. They're just like, yeah, great. I'll go get it for you. Just go ahead and get situated. Do your best to get comfortable, because after the peanut ball, we're going to call your midwife back in and have her check you. I think there was like 30 minutes left at this point of being monitored. And guys, I kid you not, she put the peanut ball in between my legs and I'm laying sideways. And I remember this vividly. I'm laying there sideways on my left side, and she puts the peanut ball there, and I feel a contraction coming on. So I reach for Josh's hand. I'm like, I'm getting a contraction right now. And Eleanor kicked me, and my water broke. It wasn't just a little trickle. It was a gush. I'm like, oh, my water just broke. And I'm still having a contraction, but for some reason, I started to freak out a little bit because there's fluid everywhere. And actually, that's the reason why I freaked out, was because there was fluid like everywhere. I'm wearing baggy sweatpants, so I have my water going all over the place. The bathroom is just right next door to us, so I book it to the bathroom. And by this point, my contraction was done by the time I got up. And I go to the bathroom, and on my way, I tell Josh, I'm like, tell the nurses that my water just broke. And he opens the door, and the nurses station's like right there. So it's the nurses station, the triage room that we were in, and then the bathroom. So it's a very small maternity ward. He pokes out, he's like, hey, so her water just broke. Just very calmly, matter of fact. And a whole bunch of nurses ran into the room that had the birthing tub, because prior to this, I had told them I really want a water birth if the room is available with a tub. And they're like, yeah, no one is in there. We can make sure that you get that room. And it was even in my chart that I wanted a water birth too. So they saw that, and they knew, they had me tell them that. So after I kind of compose myself, and I'm still in the bathroom, and I'm peeing, and of course water is still coming out of me, I have another contraction. And guys, a contraction while your water is still intact is so much better so much better than a contraction that you get when your water is broken and there's like no water left. It was so painful. And as soon as I had that very first contraction without my water bag being intact, I was like, oh my gosh, I think I want a freaking epidural right now. And I was like, I can't, Julia, you told yourself you can do it without the epidural. And I had been preparing myself mentally and physically and emotionally and spiritually for the entire third trimester for labor and delivery. And I was talking to Josh. He knew exactly what I wanted, like exactly what I wanted out of my labor and delivery. And I had been talking to my midwife about it too. So she knew I didn't want any medication. I didn't want any drugs or anything like that. So she knew not to even offer me the epidural. And all the other nurses knew that too, because it was in my chart how very specific my birth plan was. So I didn't have any nurses offer me an epidural or any medication like that. So I get out of the bathroom after experiencing my first contraction without my water bag being intact. And I told Josh, I'm like, this is the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my entire freaking life. And at that point, I like stripped all my clothes off because I was having hot flashes. They had to get an IV in me because I did test positive for group B strep. So they had to quickly administer that because they could kind of tell that things were progressing really quickly for me. And then they started doing all of the like the questions and getting my chart and getting like that section of my chart ready to go. So I had a nurse in there. She was doing all that. She was so patient. She kept asking me questions, but she would make sure to ask them after I had a contraction, or if she needed it right away, then she would ask Josh because he would had to advocate for me at that point. And I remember her asking me, she's like, okay, this is a really dumb question, but I need to ask you, what would you rate your pain level being at right now? And I remember saying, it's at an 8 right now. And Josh actually told me this afterwards. He's like, when you said that it was at an 8, she looked at me and said, it's not at an 8 yet. Meaning that it was a lot lower and it was just the beginning. But looking back now, I'm like, no, that was definitely at an 8 because I know what a 10 feels like. And I very quickly got to a 10 once my water was gone. And it was consistent at that point, like the pain level. So once I got to my IV in me, they had to do a little bit of monitoring for the baby just to make sure everything was good. and I was still able to move around. They did very minimal monitoring. It was only at the beginning when they were registering me. That's the word. They were registering me. They just had to monitor the baby a little bit and make sure that the baby was okay, make sure I was okay. And then it was just game on from that point. My water broke at 6:30, and I texted all of like the guys at work, my boss and everything. I'm like, I'm not coming in today. Like, my FMLA starts now. They're like, all right, good luck. So after that, I was in obviously excruciating pain. It was painful. I got into the shower just to have some relief, and my midwife came in there prior, once my water broke, and they did the test to make sure that it was in fact my water. And she's like, all right, I know you wanted a water birth, but try to wait to go into the tub because sometimes it can delay progressing any further. So I was like, all right, I'm just gonna, like, can I get in the shower at least? She was like, yeah, you can get in the shower, just kind of hold off on getting into the tub. So I got into the shower and I stayed in there. I don't even know how long I stayed in there. I stayed in there for quite a bit. And then I got to the point where, for some reason, they didn't have like a stool or a chair in the tub or in the shower, at least none that I can remember. But I wasn't able like to stand through the contractions anymore. It was very painful and really uncomfortable because I didn't have my water bag intact. So it was just her head pressing on my pelvic bone, just like constantly every 5 minutes. And then I got out of the shower and I said, I need you guys to fill up this tub. I can't do it right now. Like, I can't lay in bed. I wasn't comfortable in the bed. I wasn't comfortable anywhere else but in the water. So as they are filling up the tub with water, it has to be at a certain degree. So they had to kind of tinker with it for a little bit. And I was having contractions, obviously, and I was leaning up against the bed. And I remember thinking, this kid is sunny side up right now because I am having the worst back pain of my entire life. And they tell you when you experience contractions, it's going to be super low and it's going to be all in your belly. If the baby's sunny side up, meaning that their face is like facing towards your belly, instead of their face facing towards your back, like they want the baby to be. But if the baby's sunny side up, then you're going to have excruciating back labor, and that's exactly what I was having. But because I was in my own world trying to work through these contractions without an epidural or any other pain medication, I didn't voice that to anyone. I just said, I'm having really bad back pain. And one of the nurses came and she tried to do the, what's it called, the rebozo thing. It's basically like a scarf that you hold over the belly and you kind of hang a little bit and they kind of wiggle a little bit. And a lot of women love it. They get such relief from it. I hated it. As soon as she started doing it, I said, stop, like, don't do that. It doesn't feel good. Just stop. So she stopped, and I think Josh might have tried to do counter pressure on my hips, and I didn't like that. I just didn't want to be touched at that point. So, again, all of the nurses that were in the room with us were amazing. I cannot say enough good things about them, and I am very much looking forward to labor and delivery this time because all the nurses are just fantastic. So once the tub was full, I was able to go in. I'm still like a butt naked at this point because I don't care. I just need to get through these contractions and I need this kid out of me. I had been in there for a few hours and Josh put Friends on one of our phones, I think. So I had that playing in the background and I was having contractions every 3 to 5 minutes, and he was telling me you need to breathe because I kept holding my breath every time I had a contraction because Eleanor was sunny side up. So a few hours later, my midwife came in there and she's like, all right, do you mind if I check you? He's like, yeah, go right ahead. So she waited until after I had my contraction and she checked me and I was still in the tub. She's like, all right, you're at a 7 right now, but I think things are going to move like very, very, very quickly for you. So I was like, all right, sweet. So I was having all these contractions still. Josh and I weren't really talking because I was just like trying my best to rest my eyes in between the contractions. And he was just right there with me, right beside the tub, just holding my hand every time I had a contraction. reminding me to breathe. And that was my biggest thing, was I wanted to hold your breath. That's what you naturally want to do when you're having a contraction, is to hold your breath. But you have to really focus on breathing. So, and throughout this entire time, my body was still getting rid of all the stuff. So I was still having the runs. And at one point, I didn't even know I was in transition, guys. Like, that's how fast everything happened. I didn't realize I was in transition from the time that she said, all right, you're at 7 centimeters, until like I got up out of the tub and I told Josh, I need to poop. And guys, like, I don't know why I did this. I knew, and I still know, that when you feel like you need to poop, when you're in labor and you're that far along, it's most likely the baby. But because I had been having diarrhea up until this point, I thought it was still that. Because I was so exhausted. I'm still in my own, like, Julia world, trying to get through these freaking contractions, because it is unbearable. And thankfully, one of the nurses came in and she asked Josh, like, hey, where is she? Is she in the bathroom? He's like, yeah, she said she had to go poop. And I, like, barely sat on the toilet, and the nurse came and she's like, do not do anything. That is your baby. Get in the tub right now. And as soon as she said, I'm like, crap, that is the baby. And I knew that too. But when you're in the moment, you really don't think of anything. So I got back in the tub. She quickly ran down and got my midwife, or called whatever. My midwife was there in like a second. So she came in. She checked me again. She asked if she could check me. She's like, hey, I heard you needed to push. Like, can I check you? And it's like, all right, go right ahead. Do what you need to do. Like, just don't ask. Just do what you need to do. She checked me and she's like, all right, yep, that's your baby. But your baby's head isn't fully in position. Like, it's kind of twisted. And remember, I said that Eleanor was sunny side up. And so she said, like, can you kind of get up a little bit? Just like kind of adjust yourself in the tub. And I'm going to try to rotate the head. And it'll rotate the body. So we did that, and it only took a few seconds. And then she's like, all right, you can start pushing whenever you want. And I was like, you're not going to tell me? Or like, I don't like what it was nothing like in the shows or in the movies or anything like that. She's like, nope, when you feel the need to push, just go ahead and push whenever. So she was just there in the tub with me, or like sitting on the edge of the tub with me. And I was like, sweet. So I just started pushing, and I don't know if this happens quite often or if it was just like a freak thing for me. I didn't feel any of my contractions when I was pushing. Like, I had no sensation of when I needed to push. So I would just push when I wanted to and for how long I wanted to. And there were a few times that my midwife or a nurse was like, you can take a break if you need to. I was like, no, I want to get this kid out of me. Like, I just want to know if I have a girl or a boy, and I want to be done with it. But I wasn't in any pain. I didn't feel the ring of fire. I didn't feel anything. And I think it's because I was in the tub for so long. So she, Eleanor's head came out. And at that point, that's when things like went crazy. So when you are in labor and delivery and you're pushing, you obviously have your provider, your midwife, OBG, whoever. And then you have a nurse for you. And then you have, it's either 1 or 2 nurses for you and then 1 or 2 nurses for the baby. So there's anywhere between 3 to 5 people in there, along with whoever else you have. So I only had Josh in there with me. And then Eleanor's head came out, and she's like, all right, the head is out. You can feel it. So I felt it, which was like the most awesome experience ever, because every time I feel her head now, or I just like play with her hair, it takes me right back to feeling her head when she was coming out of me. And some women think that's like the grossest thing or like the weirdest thing. I love it, and I would love to be able to catch my baby this next time. Anyways, so she's like, all right, just a few more pushes, then the body will be out. So I pushed with all of my might. I was like, I am so close. Like, I see the light at the end of the tunnel. I am about to finish this marathon. And I was pushing, and she noticed that her shoulders weren't coming out one at a time like they're supposed to. So she's like, all right, I need you to get out of this tub. And mind you, her head is out of me at this point, and I am laying in a tub. I'm like, I can't get out. And then that's when her tone switched real quick from like really encouraging and loving and just like flowers and peace to, you need to get up right now. And I was like, okay. So I knew I needed to get up. So before she told me to get up, she must have told one of the nurses, push the emergency button. And all of these nurses, I think it was all of their nurses throughout the entire maternity ward, came flooding into our room. One of them very calmly told Josh, like, I know this is really scary for you, but I need you to go over here in the corner. Just wait. Everything's going to be okay. I just need you to get out of the way right now. And a whole bunch of nurses came in. They helped me out of the tub because Eleanor's head was hanging out at me. And I had to get into a better position to push the rest of her out. So I was able to get into the corner and have better leverage for my legs. I was able to actually like put them on the edge of the tub while still being in the corner. It was a corner tub. So like imagine in that corner, there's a tub. I was in the corner and I was able to put my feet on the ledge to have better leverage to push her out. So I was able to do that, and it only lasted, like in my head, it only lasted like 2 minutes. It wasn't very long. I just needed better leverage to get her out. But what was really scary for Josh was when my midwife told the nurse to push the emergency button, and all of the nurses came flooding in, and he had to go to the side. And I remember looking at him. And he was like not freaking out, but you could tell that there was something wrong. And I'm thinking, why is he acting like this? Like nothing is wrong right now. I just need to get the kid out. Like everything is okay. It wasn't until afterwards, after we came home and it had been a few weeks, he told me everything. I was like, oh, okay. So it wasn't traumatic for him. It was just a little scary for him. So pushed the rest of Eleanor out. They plopped her on me, and she was so slippery. My midwife, at that point was in the tub with me because she had to get her out. So she was like, her pants were all soaked and everything. And I just remember Eleanor was so big. She was 9 pounds, 7 ounces. So she was a big baby. And she wasn't crying at first. She wasn't making any noise. And I'm waiting. And I'm like patting her and I'm trying to get her to make some noise. And I'm like, she's not making any noise. Is she breathing? And one of the nurses, they were kind of rubbing her down and doing that kind of thing like they normally do to stimulate the baby. And the nurse was like, yeah, the baby just needs a little bit of time. It was very traumatic for the baby. Everything is okay though. And like as soon as she finished that sentence, Eleanor cried, and Josh came over. And I was like, Josh, like, what do we have? Do we have a boy or a girl? And he looked, and then he looked at me and he said, we have a daughter. And it was wonderful. I'll never forget that moment. So once Eleanor cried, she was still attached to the umbilical cord, I don't think she was attached to the umbilical cord anymore because of how fast everything had happened and how chaotic it was. Josh didn't have the opportunity to cut the umbilical cord like we both had planned, but I asked him if he felt like he missed out on an opportunity. He's like, no, because everything was so crazy. Like that was the least of my concerns. I was like, all right, at least you don't have any regrets. But I still had to birth the placenta. So I got out of the tub. They helped me out. All the nurses and Josh helped me get out of the tub, and I was able to lay on the bed. And my midwife's like, all right, so I just need you to do a little push to get the placenta out. I'm gonna try my best to pull it out as you push. So that's what we did. And I didn't expect to feel that way trying to get the placenta out, because I had spent, it was only 20 minutes that I pushed for Eleanor. I started pushing 10:10 and she was born at 10:32, something like that. And my abs were just in so much pain and so sore from pushing her out and pushing hard that just doing like a little push to get the placenta out was really taxing for me. And I remember telling my midwife, like, it really is uncomfortable and I'm having a hard time gaining the strength to push the placenta out. She's like, okay, I'm gonna pull even more, but I don't want to tear it. So when I say you need to push, that's when you need to push. So she did that, and thankfully she was able to just like gently pull it out and not me having to really push. That was nice. I really wanted to see my placenta, but again, because of how everything had happened and how many people were in the room, I didn't get the chance to like fully examine it. I just saw it in the bin that was right next to me. So after that, excuse me, after I gave birth to Eleanor and I birthed the placenta, and she made sure that all of the pieces were attached to the placenta, there was nothing missing. That's when she started to stitch me up. And I had asked her, I'm like, how bad did I tear? She's like, honestly, you barely tore at all. If anything, it was more abrasions. And then when she was done stitching me up and everything, I had the nurses, they kind of cleaned off my legs because my legs were covered in blood between Eleanor and I. Actually, it was just me. It was all my blood. And they started doing like the Apgar thing for Eleanor. They had to do it twice, which is common. It's quite normal because the first time the baby fails, and then the second time after a few minutes they're more stimulated and everything, then they pass. So that's what happened with her. They started assessing me, and by assessing I mean they started, you know, massaging my uterus, and that felt fantastic. It wasn't as bad as what people make it out to be, in my opinion, but I just gave birth to a 9 pound 7 ounce baby without any pain medication, so having my uterus massaged was like a breeze. And yeah, we started breastfeeding and everything was great. It honestly is like crazy to think about her birth, and then the fact that in 2 months I'm doing it all over again. But yeah, that is Eleanor's birth story. You know, 19 months later, she's a feisty little toddler. And then we're about to do this all over again, and I am so excited. I can't wait. I can't wait to find out if we're having a boy or girl. I'm very excited. But that is it, you guys. I will see you guys later, and thank you so much for watching. Bye.